It's always hard in the first year. He goes, 80% of the stuff that you think this is brilliant. He goes, you better be ready to pivot because you'll be out the door in 6 months. 80% of the stuff doesn't work. Can you pivot to what works? And whatever works, double down on. What doesn't, get rid of it. He goes, now, over time, if it's still hard years later, it's not a good business. And I've always felt that. Any relationship, go to therapy, figure it out. But if you're 9 years in and you have to go to therapy twice a week, it's just too damn hard. Last night, Philadelphia beats Washington. Washington's the worst team in the bubble. Washington's awful. And Ben Simmons is limping off, and they should have put this game away literally 6 minutes in. I don't think Washington has a player that could be in the Sixers' top 6 rotation. Philadelphia should roll them. Simmons gets hurt. A couple days ago, I said Embiid was yelling at one of his teammates. This is too hard. It's just too hard. This is the classic example of, I understand, this is the third year. It's got to work now. Just think about this. Think about all the things that don't work. Why are they awful on the road? They're a terrible road team. Why? Chemistry's not good. They had to switch Ben Simmons' position as they entered the bubble. Now he's a forward. They're constantly rearranging their pieces. They let go of Redick. They bring in Al Horford. Every year they got to rearrange the deck chairs. Brett Brown's on the hot seat every year. He's struggling to make Embiid and Simmons get along. And by the way, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid do not fit together. I'm sorry, but AD and LeBron, Joey and I laugh, 3 games in, you're like, oh, it's perfect. Chris Paul had a bunch of guys he'd never seen before. 20 games in, you're like, oh, it works. Kawhi and Paul George felt like 15 games in, it worked. LeBron and D. Wade's games weren't perfectly fit together. They're kind of the same guy. And 17 games in, they started winning all their games. You start looking at Kemba and the Celtics, worked instantly. By the way, Kevin Durant, a superstar to Golden State, that could have been problematic. 2 weeks in, it worked. Peyton Manning to Denver, great September. Emmanuel Sanders last year, the Niners inserted him into the wide receiving corps. First game in, it works. Nothing can be this hard. You look at Shaq and Kobe. But Shaq and Kobe were kids. Kobe was really literally a kid. And then Del Harris had him. And they're young. But they kept getting better. And then Phil Jackson comes in. And they keep getting better. And you get a dynasty. And by the end, they wore each other out. But you kept seeing growth. Embiid and Simmons are 3 years in. Multiple teammates in. They keep rearranging the roster. The Philadelphia's talent is incredible. Why are they scraping around with crappy Washington? Why are teammates yelling at each other? If you're 9 years into a marriage and you're still at therapy 2-3 times a month, maybe it's too hard. Just maybe it's not meant to be. Joy Taylor with the news.
No.
Heard on the news. This is the Herdline News.
Well, this show is America's destination for everything Tom Brady and the Bucs.
Yes, it is.
You broke the story.
Yeah. The story. We did, actually.
You have called it Bucs to the Super Bowl this year. You're all in. So I want to know how you feel about this. Tom Brady, obviously, most accomplished quarterback of all time. Many feel the greatest quarterback of all time. Bruce Arians, however, is taking a page out of Bill Belichick's book. Even though he's usually the fun guy and a player's coach, he is not giving Brady any special treatment in Tampa.
Oh, no, he's just another guy. He gets cussed out like everybody else. So it's no different that way.
I don't know if I buy that entirely. I do think Bruce Arians probably cusses everyone out at the same level, but I do think that Brady is a self-starter, so I think he probably avoids a little bit of the chastising from coach to begin with.
You know what? I was given great advice years ago by somebody at another sports company. He said, if you ever get rich as an on-air person, don't drive your nice car to work. Don't drive the Lambo to work. You are one of a community. Just be humble. Everybody knows you're doing very well. Don't put it in people's faces. I am a huge believer. Yell at your star quarterback in front of the backup running backs. This is the way it has to work. By the way, I've heard this about Dwayne Wade. Pat Riley was tougher on and loved Dwayne Wade. But Dwayne Wade was so great and understood the value of him getting scolded that everybody's like, well, Dwayne's getting scolded. There is incredible value in being one of the guys when you're probably not one of the guys.
Well, you're right, because everybody knows what athletes make. Everybody knows what Tom Brady's accomplished.
And he stayed at Jeter's place.
And if you're in certain businesses, people have a general idea of how well you're doing and what your status is. But if you're a part of a team, you want people to feel like they are a part of that team.
You're accountable. You get held accountable. That's the difference between
a leader and an individual talent, and we see that all the time. It's not so much that you need to be humble in a way that's disingenuous, because sometimes people go to the other end of it, like, oh no, I am just one of the guys. Like, no, you're not, but you do allow the coach to, because it's really what it is, because I mean Brady's going there, so they obviously had a conversation. You allow yourself to be in that situation so that everyone can feel like this is fair and we're working together, as opposed to like he gets his own special treatment. But I also think those guys that excel at those levels, and I mean, I'm not putting myself in Tom Brady's category, but I know myself, whatever accomplishment I have, I still want to be critiqued from people that I respect. I still want coaching. I still want to continue to learn.
Yes, but you're not, for the record, Joy, that's not everybody's like that.
Well, I just don't think you get better if you're not like that.
Of course.
And those guys, Wade, Brady, they want to be coached and coached hard.
But you're smart enough and self-aware enough that you see that. I've been in this business 30 years. Not everybody thinks like you. That's not the way it works.
I'll stop, Colin.
No, she is glorious.
So it would seem like late round or undrafted rookies would be at a disadvantage in the NFL this year without the normal offseason or preseason games. This is kind of interesting, though, because that was my thinking, because it's going to be really rough on the undrafted rookies or vets that are trying to get on team. But practice squads are expanding from 10 to 16, and Doug Peterson thinks that those players are actually in a great position to succeed this year.
We're going to get some really good opportunities here in these next coming weeks. They're going to learn a lot from the veterans. The way I've got the schedule set up is for them to learn and to be successful. And then once we get into the padded portion of training camp is where we really get to see where these guys are. We truly feel that these young guys are going to be the ones that are going to have to help us throughout the entire season.
The Rams started something a couple years ago, kind of giving veterans camp off. The reality is that's become kind of a trend that free agents talk about. The veterans don't get all the snaps, especially line play veterans. You can walk into a camp as a young guy, and if you want the snaps, you'll get the snaps.
Yeah, the veterans don't need to learn how to play football.
Right.
They just need the calluses that camp gives you.
Yes.
So that when you get out on the field, you're not on the sideline right away because you're not in football shape. But they don't need to learn the playbook. They don't need to learn the system. The guys that you've already had there, or the veterans that can pick up a playbook quickly. Tom Telesco talked about this yesterday on our show as well. This was a real concern for a lot of people, like not having preseason, having these, the camps be eliminated. Like that's really going to affect a lot of guys. But because they've expanded the practice squad, that's more jobs. Like that's what Telesco said yesterday. It's really actually a great situation. You have a better chance of making a team.
One of the things in kind of just life that drives me nuts is when people do things because your grandpa did them. And this whole thing about, if you don't have 4 preseason games. And everybody now is like, it's funny. You have all these Zoom meetings, and if you really study, guys are right. People are like in the NBA bubble. We were like, these guys won't be. The offenses have looked so good. Now, defense is about effort, but in terms of polish and refinement, the NBA offenses have looked great. The idea that you need all these shoot-arounds for teams during the regular season, stop it. These are pros. Like the idea you need 4 preseason games. These are men. You Zoom meeting, you can get so much film.
I think the one thing that a lot of people have taken out of this time is all those meetings we were having may be a little bit unnecessary.
Maybe.
I'm not a huge meeting person. I'm like, if it can be done in a text over a call, text me. If it can be done over a call, over a meeting, call me. Like let's just all be more efficient with our time. Meetings are great, but not always necessary. Finally, Kevin Durant is giving his prediction for this year's NBA champions. He said he doesn't like to guess what will happen because obviously you never know what is going to happen, especially in this situation. But if he had to choose, he would pick the Bucks and the Clippers to reach the finals. He gives the edge to the Clippers to win the title because the team is so deep. So, me and Kevin Durant have the same prediction.
Yeah, you know what? I was Clippers Celtics.
You were Celtics at the beginning of the year.
The Celtics have a huge problem. I've watched them now against teams with size. They don't match up. They just don't match up with Milwaukee. Boston cannot beat Milwaukee 4 times in 2 weeks. I literally watched this bubble, and I'm like, I'm sorry. It's Milwaukee Clippers. That's how I feel this morning.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt at the beginning of the season. I mean, obviously, all things being equal, the bubble stays the way that it is, and there's nothing dramatic that happens. I think that that's like a safe prediction to go in that direction, especially watching what's happening with the Lakers. But the depth with the Clippers was always what was interesting to me. And generally, it's not really about depth in the playoffs, right? Like, we talk about, like, oh, how deep they are. It really comes down to the stars. But because the Clippers have such high level at their depth, it just makes such a huge difference. And there's so many shooters, like they match up so well with so many different teams.